time for a next session, which is a panel discussion with the theme of holding the bulls by its horn. So I would like to welcome Dr. Jitendra. He is the head of critical care medicine and chief of critical care medicine and chief medical quality in Artemis Hospital, Gurgaon.
Ashish,
And it's a
your
very
internet connection is
hello.
Ashish, your internet connection is unstable.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Now, yes, yes.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, good.
So after the first beautiful session, we would move on to the next session, which is a panel discussion on ethical and legal issues in neuro ICU, for which I would like to invite Dr. Jitendra Sharma. He is the Chief of Critical Care and Chief Medical Quality in Artemis Hospital, Gurgaon, and very well-known name in the critical care medicine in India. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ashish, for nice introduction. This is a panel discussion with the very eminent personalities who are regularly dealing with this area. I'll start. Ashish, our first panelist is Dr. Arvind Arya. He's a HOD neuroanesthesiology and the critical care at IBHAS, Delhi. Second panelist is Dr. G.S. Umeshwar Rai. He's a senior professor at Department of Neuroanesthesia at NIMHANS, Bangalore. Unfortunately, Dr. Yatin Mehta could not make it, so he's not available today with us for the panel discussion. Our next panelist is Dr. Dhruv Chaudhary, very well-known figure in the critical care. He's a senior professor and head of Department of Pulmonary Critical Care Medicine at PGI Rohtak, and he is the president of the Indian Society of Critical Care. And Dr. Jitendra Sharma, he is a gynecologist by medical profession, along with he's a very renowned medico-legal counselor. He's a LLB, he's done LLB in the law, and he written so many books, especially the consent and the law in the gynae obstetrics. I'll start panel discussion with just to roll the ball. Okay. So it's a case scenario, 21-year-old male met with an accident while he was driving bike without helmet, brought to ER with a severe brain injury. On assessment, we found a significant brain injuries requiring a neurosurgical intervention. Neurosurgical intervention was done, shifted to ICU, and the next day on examination, he found E1, M1, V1, pupils 4 mm, non-reacting. Brief counseling was done. Subsequently, brainstem testing was done. When all prerequisites were met, family was informed about brain death and counseling was done for organ donation. After 2-3 sessions of the discussions and counseling, relative chose not to go for organ donation. So how to proceed further? I direct this question to Dr. Arya.
I'm audible to all. Good morning to all.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Actually, first we have to look what is actually the concept of death in India actually. Still, because there is so much controversy about the death in India, this concept of brain death that comes after the enactment of the Transportation of Human Organs Act, that is THO, in 1994 actually. Before that, there were only two acts, Section 46 of IPC, and another one is the Act for the Registration of the Birth and Death. They both clearly said that only the loss of circulatory and the pulmonary functions is considered as a death. So when we are considering and we are going for such a case, and when patients are not ready for the organ donations, means the question arises whether we should take the patient from the ventilator off or not. So in such scenarios, the problem is that still after this 2018 the Constitution Bench Supreme Court's directions for the brain death declaration, still the one is the important is the concept. So we can't go without the consent of the attendants or the relatives and the close ones who are nearby, particularly parents or spouse, for the switching of the ventilators. So this is the one of the scenarios, because the confirmation of death only with the help of brain death is not sufficient to, as per the existing laws of the IPC and the registration of the death and birth. Hello, Dr. Jitendra.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah, please continue.
So now the patient mother is denial and does not accept death and want to continue all aggressive management. So how to proceed this situation, Dr. Rao?
Now here we have got a patient who is clearly brain dead. Brain death examination has been done and the patient can be proclaimed brain dead. But as Dr. Arya has already said, except in the context of organ donation, brainstem death is not considered as death. That is an unfortunate situation. And the patient relatives have to agree for discontinuation of the treatment, without which the treatment cannot be stopped and the ventilator cannot be discontinued. So what needs to be done is law has to be amended to define universal brain death criteria. So there are three different acts which deal with brain death in India. One is the Births and Deaths Act, and the second one is IPC, and third one is organ donation. Unfortunately, in India, brain death has been declared only in the context of organ donation. So if we delink this definition from Organ Transplantation Act and make a uniform births and the declaration of death, the definition should be irreversible cessation of cardiorespiratory function or brain death, irreversible cessation of brainstem function. Without that, now at the current existing laws, there is no possibility of disconnecting the patient from the ventilator. This is unfortunate because continuation of the treatment is not beneficial to the patient. It only aggravates the agony of the patient. And most importantly, another patient who is likely to benefit from the ICU bed is not benefiting from this. So then this confusion about brain death came into existence because of the concept of brain death has not been popularized among public. Secondly, there are these occasional case reports which reported that the patient has recovered after being declared brain death. These case reports have to be taken with a pinch of salt. And thirdly, even among the some of the physicians and of course the lay public, there is a confusion between persistent vegetative state and brain death. So that has to be clarified to the public. And there are these people who argue that Harvard criteria, which we use for a declaration of brain death, are not supported by clinical data. These are the reasons why the confusion still persists.
Thank you, Dr. Rao. So what we understood, if the patient is going for the organ donation, then we can declare the brain death. And suppose not going for the organ donation, or a patient's family is not really accepting the severity of the brain death, not the severity of the brain dysfunction, it's actually brain death. So we cannot move forward. Is it really so in India? Dr. Dhruv, can you comment?
Good morning, everybody. And Dr. Jitendra, I have been listening to Professor Rao as well as Arvind. Technically, what we are saying is right. You see, you look at a practical aspect. First and foremost is how well-equipped people especially the treating physician themselves are, because it's not a question of science. It's a question of attitudinal, cultural, social, not only of the caregivers, but of the care providers. I think that's very important. And what we are seeing is one of the biggest challenges for me, I would say hindrances, as the cultural issues when we are dealing it in the intensive care units. Unfortunately, we are not looking at it in our country. If you go abroad, particularly UK, they put a lot of emphasis on that. So social, cultural, religious issues have a lot of role to play into it, one. Secondly, I agree with all of them. If mother is in a denial mode, that's we had said. But you look at the emotional status of the family, young boy, 21 year, meeting an accident. And again, you're challenging your basic concept of life. So it's a question, how do you expect them to be ready in a minute? That's a question which I need to put into it. So it is going, and it's very natural for a mother to be in denial for that one. Another important point when we start looking at it, how are we deciding that this person is a brain dead? Did we take a consent to do that? Therefore, the question is, when you are doing, there are a lot of ethical, medical, legal questions start in the practical perspective starts coming up. Yes, there is a certification committee. Yes, there is there. Now, how will you certify the brainstem that you need to take a consent? There are a few people who will say, okay, you do apnea testing, other testing, and then you talk to the family. That's fine. I think somewhere that communication, or what we call in a Hindi, it's much very good word, samvad, that has to start it up with the family. And once that is there, yes, if there is no acceptance coming from the family, you are left with no other option. You continue with it. You may not upscale it, but at least you have to continue with that. And you need to repeatedly counseling the families that you have to do it. But more important than I think, along with it, what I am realizing, like in a public sector, we are working, asking somebody to go for this thing, I'm finding challenges from my own colleagues. So I think this is the practical scenario and inability of the nursing staff as well as the medical professionals working to cope with it, deal with it, because for majority it is an alliance subject not taught at the level of undergraduates. So probably it needs a 360 view than simply one intensive care perspective. Jitendra, you are not audible.
Yeah, excellent view and taking account the cultural and the social aspect. But is there any variation in the state level kind of a legal procedure? A few states,
absolutely.
Really they are allowing the disconnection of the ventilator once you declare the brain death and not going for the organ donation. Dr. Jitendra, can you put some light on it?
I don't know regarding the state to state variation actually, but the legal status is clear that if you want to discontinue the resuscitation process, then the role of at least relatives is nowhere as per law. You have to go to court to take the permission.
So this is not the EOL, sir. This is the brain death. This is
That's okay, but as said by Dr. Arvind sir and other also, that a brain death is not considered as a complete death in India. So as per the definition said by Dr. Arvind Arya, that brain death is considered death in case of Human Organ Transplantation Act only, and not others. So the signs of life, when all the signs of life disappear, then only it is considered as death as per the definition given in Birth and Death Registration Act. So brain death may not be considered complete death in all cases. It can be considered death in cases of Human Organ Transplantation Act.
Thank you, sir.
Let me say, Dr. Jitendra, actually a few states have started. Kerala in February 2020 have amended the law actually. They have started that, they have considered that the loss of brainstem reflexes and all, so they considered the brain death as actually this. So actually this is the agony of this problem, because when in the Aruna Sandbagh case actually in 2011, when the Supreme Court Judge Markandeya Karju has written it, but he does not clarify. He said that it should be decided by the Parliament of India, and it continues for so long in so many and agony of this lady Aruna Shanbag case for around 42 years, and still the Parliament inside the JP Nadda, when he was the Health Minister, he said that we do not require to enactment for this. Only the Supreme Court directions which has been given in 2000 judgment is considered to be the enactment. So states has to follow its own governance. So I think there should be a universal concept for the declaration of the brain death, as said by the Dr. Uma Maheshwar Rao sir. And secondly, until unless the amendment goes in the IPC and in the registration, because when you go for the registration of death, you required the death of the person because of the circulatory and the respiratory. This is written on the forms actually. Otherwise, there are so many legal issues. If the insurance companies, they will not provide the money, and even there are lots of things. So this is there must be some universal in all the laws.
See, Jitendra, this is what Dr. Arvind has said it. He has highlighted what I am saying. You see, you have to create a movement.
Just give me a little bit clarification. Aruna Shanbag case is more towards the end of life. We'll subsequently discuss about this. This is
surely, sir, but the Supreme Court has clearly brainstemmed that they were clearly in the. If you read the whole the judgment, they have clarified and they have said what is actually in the brain death.
Yes. You see, the Kerala always has been.
Whenever we are not able to differentiate a futility of care, EOL versus the brain death. I'll come the next segment only. This is purely related to the brain death, and of course now we are having a Form 10, which is has to be filled with the certain prerequisites and precondition, and finally it is signed by the at least the 4 person, which is specified by the government. One should be a medical administration of the hospital, or maybe a medical superintendent, authorized specialist. That is actually MCI registration has to be done. The committee has to be there, one of the member, and the neurologist or neurosurgeon and the medical officer, or maybe a physician over there.
Sir,
and lastly,
can I add one thing?
Sir, I have to say one thing, Dr. Jitendra. Actually, this now after 2011, this has been amended. There is no more requirement of a neurophysician or a neurosurgeon in a panel. Even a surgeon or a physician or an anesthetist or intensivist, if a neurophysician and neurosurgeon is not available, they can certify this.
Exactly.
You see, the challenge is, look, I have been inspecting other institutions in our state. For our institution for brain death certification committees are there now. People have been there, amendments have been there. But again, I am saying Kerala is extremely progressive state. In terms of it, they achieve the things which we are still dreaming up in very large states of this country. They achieved universal immunization, universal primary health care 20 years ago. So that's one part of it. But I agree, we need to go with the uniformity. But I think most important is that this has to be entered into the mindset of the medical professionals, A, law graduates too. And you need to change the social, cultural aspect of it. We are all forgetting the medical. You will say, I'm bringing something else. No, because brain death is a technical thing. But this technical aspect has to have a social acceptance. You look at in Tamil Nadu today, the number of organ transplant donations and organ transplant is acting because the political will was there. Therefore, because of the late Mrs. Jayalalitha, she became the chairperson and she was able to deliver it. Gujarat, we are finding some amount of it. Similarly, Karnataka has now started taking over it. So probably things are changing. They may not be changing as such. Therefore, when we talk in terms of you are trying to shake the person from outside, from their beliefs, that is the key. And that is where we have not emphasized. We are all talking about technicalities, fine. But when you are talking about technicalities, it needs to be gelled. That is where the problem is coming up. And I think there is a universal agreement is that when you talk in terms of brain death, it is primarily in the scenario of organ transplant, organ donation.
Basically, there is a slight difference of opinion from my side. See, looking to the definition as mentioned by Arvind Arya, given in Birth and Death Registration Act and even in IPC, there is no mention that it amounts to respiratory or circulatory death. There is no clear-cut mention. What they say that there is no sign of life. It is defined in another way. When there is no sign of life, then it is considered as death. Now, so according to that definition, you can put brain death as a death of the patient also. And you cannot continue treating that patient. Okay. So
Dr. Gitendra, you have entered into a very controversial area. No sign of life. You see, your heart will be working. Sometimes your spinal reflexes are there. So that creates its own challenges.
That remains there. See, the skin will remain live after even after 24 hours of death. That doesn't mean that patient is live.
That is all right.
The definition of death means there is no sign of life. That is the definition of death in IPC as well as in Birth and Death Registration Act. It doesn't define that respiratory or circulatory failure should be there for brain.
But general concept
Dr.
Gitendra, but in the general concept in law is that they still consider that the circulatory and pulmonary functions as a evidence of that life actually. They don't know about it is a technicality, as Dr. Devchaudhary has said already, that only we persons are saying that it's a brain death. Actually, the certification is something else, but it is very hard to prove in a different scenarios and to acceptance by the society as a evidence of the death. That is the problem.
But even legally and all these things, suppose somebody is going for the organ donation and we make the death certificate, it is not at all different from any other death certificate. So that certificate and the pronouncing the death,
you see, Jitendra filling of a death certificate, everybody writes practically 99% cardiopulmonary arrest.
Yes,
that is what if you see those things.
For the organ donation.
But repeatedly, at the end of the day, that they write it because, as what Dr. Arya said, what Dr. Gitendra Sharma is talking about, a very forward-looking viewpoint. Now, only the Supreme Court can interpret and say it, or Parliament can define it.
Actually going for the organ donation.
You see, if you see it, I simply tell it, I'm not a law graduate. When they ask the convict to be hanged till death, and how they are defining till there is no evidence of pulse or the heart activity or respiration. You see, so what he says is something, probably you need something, a judge who is socially active, who is a social conscious, expanding it up. So probably then it can take care of a lot of things till the law comes up. Till the law comes up, it is the Supreme Court word. But end of the day, Parliament has to take up.
But once we announce the death on the person going for the organ donation. So person going for the organ donation, so ultimately we pronounce the death in that person also, and that is not based upon the absence of the circulation, the respiratory. That is anyway. The more practical next aspect, Professor Rao actually just wanted to know a very brief kind of directions, especially the so many small hospitals are also having, and there's repeatedly notion or assumption the hospital is not really approved for the transplant, cannot go for the brain stem declaration of death. So just a brief kind of this thing, so that there may be so many audience which may be related to the small hospital not be having a facility for the organ transplantation. They will really get clarified idea. Can they declare brain death and person can be for the organ donation if the hospital is not having the facility for the organ transplantation? Sir,
if organ donation is being considered in a given patient and the hospital does not have organ transplant facility, I would think that the patient can be shifted to another hospital with organ transplantation facility.
Just for the pronouncing the brain death, do we really require the shift of the patient, or we can transfer? No, we can ask the retrieval team over in the hospital.
Well, there are two ways. One is the brain death can be declared in that hospital, and the organ retrieval team can come and do the rest of the job, or shift the patient to another hospital and then proceed with the brain death declaration and organ retrieval.
Thank you. I think, of course, there is always controversies related to that, but we finally understood if the person is going for the organ donation, then it's very easy to deal with the brain death. Otherwise, it's a very difficult, maybe a different stand legally, ethically, or culturally. But time is keep on changing. Things are changing. Dr. Arvind Arya already
Doctor,
pointed out.
Dr. Chitendra, one comment. Actually, in our institute, we are having a very good team. Actually, now comes the role of the medical social workers and the psychiatric social workers. If we formulate a team in our institutes regarding it, the declaration of the brain death, then it's become a very good in the coming years, actually. So what they do, actually, they do the repeated counselings of the close attendant of the patients, and many times they understand what is going on, and also their suffering is also reduced. This is another part of it.
So definitely, altogether, this particular panel discussion, we are keeping little bit a legal aspect and ethical aspect.
One thing I
so
want
many
to add,
steps
Dr.
can be
Jitendra,
taken for the yes.
for removal of organ, you are not supposed to have registration of your center under Human Organ Transplantation Act.
That's what I wanted.
Yes, but for transplantation, you are supposed to have. So if your center is not registered under Human Organ Transplantation Act, then you can collect at your center the organ, and you can transport that organ to be transplanted in the hospital which is registered under Human Organ.
So that's why I wanted a message for the declaration of brain death and the organ retrieval. Not at all your hospital is really registered for the organ donation. These are two different things. We should not intermix these. Transplantation is a separate program and the organ retrieval is a separate program. Quickly, we move on to the second case scenario. It's more controversies, but of course, a few things are now settled down. So with this background, a 56-year-old female, carcinoma breast, recurrence with the extensive metastasis, including the brain, lung, liver, and bone, conscious oriented, admitted to ICU for breathlessness on BiPAP support, still in respiratory distress, require intubation, mechanical ventilation, not as a part of resuscitation, but we know as an intensivist, they are the progressing respiratory failure requiring the intubation. So family agree for intubation, but the patient is not willing for the intubation. How to proceed, Dr. Gitendra? Very common situation.
Yes. Yes. Sir, basic thing of consent, the basic concept of consent is that if patient is in condition to take the decision, okay, so if patient is conscious and competent to take the decision, then you have to follow the decision of patient only. There is no role of consent or insistence of relative till the patient is conscious. So if patient is conscious and patient is refusing, then it is the autonomy of patient to decide. Right to autonomy is there. So it is a right of patient to decide what to be done to his or her body, and nobody can force her to take treatment.
Yes, sir. So that is a
you can take refusal treatment.
Strong...
You can take it in writing the treatment as consent for refusal, and you may not treat.
I agree with Dr. Gitendra actually. There are two things. One is the consent. Secondly, is the principle of the ethics. What is he saying is the principles of the autonomy, means patient had the right for the self-determination until unless patient said that you continue for this procedure, only then you can, otherwise you can't. Yeah. That is one of the parts.
So that's a very important pillar for the bioethics, that is autonomy, and we have to follow. And the next scenario, patient is not in the position for the decision and the family denies for the intubation. Dr. Dhruv, are you there? Can you comment on it? Because this is again a very common situation we deal in the ICU. He might not, is not. So,
should I answer this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if patient is not in position of decision making, then there is no role of consent of patient's relative. Consent means you are informing that what are the consequences of no treatment, what are the risks of the treatment, what is the purpose of it. You are taking permission of the patient relatives. So it is in such situation, it is always better to put patient on intubation. Commit something, not to omit, because omission is a bigger negligence and commission is not a bigger negligence. So whenever patient is not in position to take the decision, and if the relative refuses, you should either treat the patient as per your opinion, and second, if still relatives refuses, you take that, tell them, the relatives of the patient, to take the patient away against your medical advice. So there are only two situations. If patient remains in your hospital, you have to treat the patient.
So,
Dr.
Refusal
Gitendra,
consent of
Dr.
relative
Gitendra, the
or
problem is,
has no value.
Dr. Gitendra, the problem starts coming up. What defines the treatment and the extent of the treatment? I think that's where the question is. And in this patient, they have very clearly said that the person is having a malignancy. And in that scenario, you see, each scenario will be different. And what we are looking at, trying to put the theoretical
Sir,
concept
whatever is the reason, the law is clear that if patient has given consent in advance, that is, if patient has done the will that I should not be treated, if such condition arises, then you may not treat. You can
see, you
execute
are
the
talking
will.
of Dr. Gitendra.
But if there is no will, there is no precondition.
so we are coming to
see,
that, sir.
Dr. Gitendra,
Just
that's what I'm saying. He's talking of advanced directives. Now, advanced directive, you will see in a very small, limited number of patients. This coronavirus epidemic, one of our professors of medicine, retired one, elderly man, he had the corona and he said, no, I don't want to do it. Don't do any DNR. Don't let me die peacefully if I die. So I think that is respected, no doubt about it. You see, you are talking about it. He is putting it in terms of futility of care, autonomy, social distribution, justice, etc., etc. You see, whatever you do, you need to justify your actions. Care defines various things. Care
Sir,
doesn't mean intubation. Care could be
relatives
palliative
have,
care. Care
sir,
could be comfort
sir, I
care.
will tell you one thing.
You see, as an intensivist, we have a very different take on this. You see, patient who is a malignancy, patient who has a malignancy, dissemination, metastatic disease, if it is taken care of, then it is unlikely that, because you need to speak to the family, and also it is written that you will act in the best interest of, nobody is there, doctors will act in the best interest of the patient, no doubt about it. But at the same time,
Sir,
having said so,
sir, let
I
me
think
clear,
I have a
sir,
written,
let
I
me
can't put
clear.
a tube simply on that basis. This is a very strong thing.
Sir,
You put
let
it a
me
note there
clear.
justifying it, it will be done.
So, of course, there is so
sir,
much
no.
fluid
Let
in this
me
status. Suppose
in
this
common cause action, sir, in common cause action versus Union of India, this was the doubt put by all the judges, that nowadays everybody has become professional. Doctors as well as relatives, everybody is commercialized. And to stop the commercialization, and we do not want any situation to come like this. And that's why there is a role of court. So if you want to take permission of, you want to stop the treatment, then you have to take the permission of court.
That's our court. Who decides the court?
Dr.
Gitendra, you are talking
Dr.
like a
Gitendra,
lawyer. I agree.
can I
But you
intervene?
see, I have a very strong difference of opinion there. Who decides in the court? It's the medical advice.
So
I think we need to be very clear about it. The only thing is,
team of medical advisor, which is appointed by High Court.
I think it's just a twisting of word, like we are arguing or discussing it. It is as
Dr. Dhruv, we are coming to that. Yes, we are coming
Dr.
to that.
Jitendra, can I intervene?
Yes, Dr. Arvind, quickly, so that
actually, I have to say two things. First of all, we should know what is DNR actually. DNR means only the do not resuscitation, means if patient is having cardiac arrest, do not do CPR, do not give inotropes, do not do intubation and put the patient on the mechanical ventilation. Apart from these 3-4 things, you have to do all the things. You have to provide a patient, because as per the Article 21, there is the right to die with the dignity. Actually, you have to provide all the other things which is required for the patient, like the care of the mouth, care of the back, care of the bowel and everything. It does not mean, DNR does not mean stoppage of all the treatment and care.
So we are coming that. Before that, just I want to touch this also important aspect. When we feel the futility of care, but like all the things, now it's the end of road, and the family actually pushes for the aggressive measurement. So how to deal with the situations medically as well as the legally, Dr. Dhruv? Dr. Dhruv, are you there?
Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Ah.
So futility of care, when we feel as a professional intensivist and every aspect, now we know there is a futility of care, but the patient's family pushes for the aggressive treatment.
You see, you realize that more than the family, I think when you discuss with the family, sooner or later they come to that term. It is your own colleagues where there is the challenge. I'm finding far bigger challenge with your colleagues in terms of different interpretations, different things going. I think somewhere we have forgotten, again, I'm coming back to what I've learned from my seniors, teachers, professors. We have forgetting that medicine also is not only technical, it's a lots and lots of art of practice and social responsibilities and looking at it. And most of our problems, actually, you may call me old fashioned now, but I love to be old fashioned, and I've realized that works, because most of the time when you start looking everything in a technical legal aspect in the management, these problems are bound to happen. I'm not saying by doing that it will not. Probability of 1 or 2, but the percentage reduces very significantly. If somebody has said do not intubate, I will respect that. If somebody says do not resuscitate, I will do that. End of life decision is your and my day in, day out. It's my bread and butter now. Practically, we need to, I give you an example today. We have a lady who had a multiple myeloma. I will give my answer that way quickly. Who had a multiple myeloma, had a chronic renal disease dysfunction. Twice we went dialyzed, everything, treatments. Now this time she came with the corona and a wife of a senior journalist. We tried to convince them there is a futility of a care in terms of, they said, no, we want ventilation, fair enough. We went with the ventilator. As expected, she had a hemodynamic instability, stabilized, acute renal failure, severity. 3 days down the line, the family comes and tells you remove everything. You see, the point I'm trying to make is that it is your colleagues who have a challenge, because death for a doctor is a defeat, but death is the only certainty with which you can be sure of. Therefore, I think we need to change and reorient our thinking about it. Yes, you cannot be right all the time. And one of the very important people in the intensive care settings who help us taking this decision are our nurses. They are the ones who stay with the bedsides. Unfortunately, we try to prophesy over everyone. So I think it's important is that when you're taking these decisions, respect the patient autonomy, respect the family relationships. The only place I want extra careful with this is especially young ladies who are married who are coming. That is one area which is a very, very tricky area where we want to have both sides of the families. But by and large, I have seen you go by the common sense of the people. They listen, they do, and they agree with it.
So a lot of things depends upon the context. Which context we are talking about? Somebody came with the maybe a acute respiratory failure after the snake bite, and there is a neuroparalytic, and
you see there is a full throttle care. So clinical context, history has not to be forgotten.
You are right, sir. So here, like, Dr. Arya has also mentioned, and Dr. Gitendra all the time is mentioning this. This is the very pillar of our end of life, especially it comes to Article 21. This constitutes of right to life and right to personal liberty. Not only that, that is also a right to the die with the dignity. So that's Article 21 says, and of course there is a little bit you can say Section 306 and Section 309 IPC is little bit, you can say both are the conflicting. Very quickly in the 2 to 3 sentence, Dr. Gitendra, can you summarize?
Can I clarify, Gitendra sir? Can I clarify on this?
Yes,
in this
sir.
regard?
Yes, sir.
If you want to understand, do not resuscitation from where this has begun. So as you have rightly mentioned, in case of P. Ratinam, the first time 309 to commit the suicide was challenged, and what it was challenged in that case, the court, the advocate said that right to make association includes right not to be the part of association. Right to speak means right to remain silent. You may not speak. So that in that way, right to life should include right to die. And that's why suicide should not be considered as crime. In that decision, that was a 2-judge bench judgment. And in that decision, it was said that 309 is violation of Article 14 and Article 21 and it should be removed. Now, as in case of Gyan Kaur versus Union of India, the same thing was said that as 309 is not crime, then 306, that is the abatement of suicide, should also not be considered as crime. Because as 309 itself is not crime, how can 306 is crime? So in that case, the judgment of P. Rathinam was reverted, and it was said that right to life does not include right to die. Hope I am audible.
Maybe I know what you, Jitendra, I will have to take a permission, as I told you, that we are.
And third thing, sir, let me complete, sir, please.
Sir, please.
Third thing, that Shanbag's case, Aruna Shanbag's case, in which it was said that if patient has no sign of living, only then passive euthanasia can be allowed. So in that case, patient was moving hand on telling something. Patient was taking food orally. So in that case, the court did not allow. So fourth thing, in case of common cause versus Union of India, in that case, what is the reason why relatives are not allowed to take decision on behalf of patient? They mention that there are many cases which have come into the knowledge of Supreme Court, that many of the relatives who want to take the property of that patient may decide against taking treatment. And some doctors are also there who, by taking money, may decide in favor of the patient for passive euthanasia. And to curtail this type of commercialization, there is there is a role of High Court, and that's why High Court comes into action, and High Court make the committee of 3 members. One neurophysician, one will be physician, one will be from another department, psychiatric. So there are team of that 3 or 4 doctors who will take a decision, unbiased decision. And if that committee will opine, then High Court will take the judgment. No relatives is allowed to take decision of do not resuscitation without taking into confidence the court. Definitely, Dhruv sir is very right that the clinical aspect should be given the respect, because in the case of terminal person developing terminal cancer, having terminal cancer, what is the need to prolong the treatment? But that is clinically we understand, but legally the court does not understand such things, and they have not considered these clinical aspect in the decision of common cause versus Union of India. And there is a clear-cut guideline that till the government comes out with a clear-cut law, these guidelines are to be followed. And according to these guidelines, if you want to do not resuscitate, you have to take into consideration the opinion of relatives, opinion of treating physician, opinion of treating nurses, or an independent opinion of the committee. But ultimate decision court will take.
You see, what you are talking,
No,
Doctor.
I'm differing, Dr. Gitendra. There are 2 things actually. You are saying this for the passive euthanasia or about the DNR. DNR, there is no need for the permission from the High Court, but yes, for the passive euthanasia means patient is already there. Then yes.
No. You see, I personally feel, Dr. Gitendra, I have a very strong difference of opinion with you. Let's not get into it. I have to go somewhere now. The thing is, people are confusing with euthanasia and end-of-life decision. They're 2 entirely different things. That is where the court has gone into it. My doctor colleagues who have become lawyers, they have also confusing it. There are 2 entirely different things. Therefore, my request is that they do not resuscitate orders are entirely different. If you take the order, patient will already will be gone away. So I think end-of-life decisions are very different from the do not resuscitate decisions. Secondly,
so many things is given in the.
You see, that is again a 2 step forward, 1 step backwards. I had a discussion with Mr. Prashant Bhushan.
Do not resuscitate. Do
not resuscitate.
Does not mean that do not give treatment.
No, Dr. Gitendra. So I'm sorry to say that then. Do not, somebody has a cardiopulmonary arrest. They says, don't do me a CPR. Will you go to a court for it?
And what is that?
Let's see.
Then we will not
do it. You see, let's not talk a language of a law, which is, you see, I'm sorry to say, being a gynecologist, you are talking that language. I'm very sorry. Law, yes, I agree. Law में भी आपका सुप्रीम कोर्ट से सेशन में आ गया नीचे, हाई कोर्ट ने नीचे डेलीगेट कर दिया है, दिक्कत नहीं है, वो दिक्कत नहीं है. I think you need to work in an intensive care unit to realize it. It's very easy to talk about it. I think we strongly disagree with it. And everywhere, end of life decisions are totally different. No.
Some law to protect.
Doctor Saab, ऐसा है. No, that does not mean that. You see, Dr. Geetendra, please, you are going to another extreme positions of it. That is not the idea of the court judgment. Court judgment is to facilitate the things. A, the basic inherent tenet of that we will not trust A, we will not trust B. As put, you know what the thing happens in the places which you are talking and quoting of.
So
therefore, I'm very clear in the intensive care situation, it is a dynamic situation. If somebody says, you look at it, and the malignancy patient, will you keep on pumping it CPR? Answer is no. That is what is the DNR decision. If somebody needs to put an intubation, they says, I don't need it. Person has a cardiopulmonary, will you put it? Answer is no. No court can take a decision that it is on the ground, you have to take it. Similarly, in end of life decision, if person is there with probability of lying 24, 48 hours there, you may go to the court. 99% of the time, discussions with the family sitting down across the table takes care of these things. You see, we are unnecessarily putting over thing which is not needed or required.
Last segment of this thing.
I'm sorry, I have to leave, so I'm just taking your leave now, Jitendra. Thank you so much. It was an enlightening discussion with Dr. Geetendra. It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
So it's always debatable issue, but anyways, we'll go for the last segment. Professor Rao, I require your view on this thing. Is it always feasible in ICU to take consent in a way suggested by the Supreme Court? Because Supreme Court has given a very specific guideline in the reference to the Samira Kohli versus Prabha Manchanda 2008. So that's require a very elaborate process of the consent. So I require your comment, sir. Is it really possible in ICU setting? Because
when the patient is in an emergency situation, the doctor has to do what has to be done. So consent forms a second line of action. So if what is to be done in an emergency situation is not done, the doctor can be found to be guilty of not performing the actual act. So consent is, in this case scenario, which you have said, where the patient requires inotropic support and all that. First, the doctor should institute the treatment, and then if the patient is able to give the consent, it's fine. Or the relatives are able to give the consent, it's fine. But if they are not available, you can't withhold the treatment.
So, thank you, sir. With this, of course,
Dr. Jitendra, one comment from actually this Samira Kohli versus was about the consent in the.
Dr. Arvind, we are running half an hour late. Please, we need
Okay, Saurabh, you can proceed. Yeah.
Of course, these are a very controversial topic, and especially they are extrapolate. Samira Kohli versus Prabha Manchanda is mainly for the surgical consent, and
surgical, yes. And that too for the elective procedure. That's
why I put it as a ICU procedure, not surgery. And sometimes it cannot be directly life-saving, maybe essential element for the life-saving. So finally, we conclude whatever we say, whatever this thing is, law is not absolute. That is a very fluid, depending upon what is the society. Law is not able to give the answer whether you put your central line, whether you put your intubation. It is our society which gives you a direction. So finally, in conclusion, again, a 4 principle of bioethics, which is important, and that is also an important element for the law also. Autonomicity, non-malfeasance, beneficence, and justice. These are the 4 principles based upon we are working, and the law is not at all absolute. It is always in context, keep on changing with the society. Actually, society makes the law. Thank you, and I think it's very fruitful and the hot discussion, and these topics is always makes the controversies among the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jitendra. Thank you all panelists. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.